Imagine a machine that just analyzed 1,000 Bach concertos, mathematically mapped the entire architecture of human sorrow, and then wrote a new symphony so profound it left an entire concert hall in tears.
Wow, yeah. That's quite an image.
Right. But now imagine that exact same underlying algorithmic architecture is at the exact same time balancing the power grid for 30 million people. Oh, and it's also predicting your next major medical issue before you even feel a single symptom.
It sounds like, speculative science fiction set in 2050 or something.
Exactly, but it isn't. That is the baseline reality we're waking up to today. So, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission here is really to just cut through all the noise and look closely at how artificial intelligence has definitively crossed over. It's not just a theoretical tech buzzword anymore. It's an active, collaborative partner shaping the very fabric of our lives.
It really is.
And we are pulling our insights from a highly comprehensive source today. It's the April 4, 2026 edition of the AI News Daily Digest.
Yeah, and when you synthesize the data across this entire digest, a very specific narrative emerges. We are no longer talking about AI as a passive tool, like just something you just pick up, use, and put back down.
Right, like a calculator or a search engine.
Exactly. We are looking at a systemic catalyst. It's driving fundamental changes across 4 massive pillars of civilization. So we're talking personal health care, planetary resource management, human culture, and global governance.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is, but it's forcing a complete reevaluation of how we interact with information across the board.
Which means for you, the listener, the era of just being a passive observer of this technology is officially over. Whether you are managing a team, running a business, or honestly just trying to navigate your own life, understanding the mechanisms behind these shifts is critical.
Absolutely. You're stepping into a world of active collaboration.
So let's bypass the surface level hype and start at the most intimate layer possible: human health. The digest highlights a massive leap in what they are calling multimodal AI. Now, we all know AI can read an X-ray, right? But this is describing something much deeper, isn't it?
It's a profound shift in capability. I mean, early medical AI was unimodal. It looked at a static image like an MRI and just searched for a tumor.
Just one data point.
Right. But what the digest is outlining now are systems trained on completely disparate, overlapping layers of data all at once.
Okay, let's unpack this. What kind of layers are we talking about here?
Well, they are simultaneously ingesting, say, a patient's genomic sequence, their historical fMRI scans, and maybe 10 years of real-time biometric telemetry from their wearable devices, like a smartwatch.
10 years of heart rate and sleep data.
Yeah, all of it. And the AI cross-references these entirely different data types to find high-dimensional correlations, stuff that a human mind literally cannot conceptualize, simply because we can't hold a 10,000-dimensional matrix in our working memory.
I certainly can't. So imagine having a super doctor in the room who has instantly memorized every medical textbook, read every clinical trial, and seen every X-ray in human history.
It's basically that, but on steroids.
Let's look at the actual mechanism there, because that is where the real value lies for people. If a patient comes in with vague symptoms, a human doctor relies on a differential diagnosis, right? Basically a mental checklist based on their med school training and their career experience.
Yes, which is inherently limited by their personal experience.
Right. But this multimodal system is projecting the patient's current telemetry into this vast mathematical space. It's comparing it against millions of clinical outcomes instantly and identifying a specific autoimmune trajectory months before it causes any irreversible tissue damage.
What's fascinating here is that predictive element. That is the core breakthrough. The digest notes that AI has essentially evolved into a continuous partner in treatment.
Meaning it doesn't just diagnose you and say, good luck.
Exactly. It doesn't hand you a diagnosis and clock out. It utilizes digital twin technology.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's essentially running a highly detailed simulation of your unique biology. And it uses that to optimize highly personalized therapies. So it can predict how your specific genetic background will metabolize a particular compound.
Wow, so it adjusts the dosage dynamically over time?
Precisely. It watches how the digital twin reacts and tweaks the real-world treatment plan.
I mean, that's incredible, but I want to challenge the conclusion the digest draws here for a second.
Go for it.
The source insists that despite this predictive superiority, AI won't replace human doctors because machines lack empathy and bedside manner. But wait, aren't we just romanticizing the human element to make ourselves feel better?
How do you mean?
Well, we already have studies showing that patients often prefer receiving sensitive medical news from specialized AI chatbots Because the algorithm is infinitely patient and never rushes them, and it's programmatically designed to use perfectly empathetic phrasing. Whereas a human oncologist might be, exhausted at the end of a 14-hour shift.
That is a highly valid counterargument. And honestly, it touches on a fascinating friction point in the medical community right now. You are right that programmatic empathy can sometimes outperform exhausted human empathy.
Right, and AI doesn't get cranky.
True. However, the limitation isn't just about delivering bad news politely. It is about longitudinal liability and contextual reality.
Contextual reality.
Yeah, medicine isn't just a math problem. It requires navigating human messiness. If the AI recommends a highly effective but physically agonizing treatment plan, the patient needs a human advocate, someone who actually understands the qualitative experience of suffering to help them weigh that decision.
I see.
The machine handles the flawless hyperdimensional data synthesis. The human physician handles the contextual ethics and the very real physical realities of the treatment journey.
So it shifts the doctor's role from being a human hard drive trying to memorize every clinical trial to being more of a complex decision manager and patient advocate.
Exactly. It's a partnership.
That makes a lot of sense. But if we can build a predictive digital twin of a human nervous system to optimize one person's health, the logical next step is to scale that exact mathematical approach, right? To build a digital twin of an infinitely more complex system.
Which is exactly what we are seeing.
And the digest goes exactly there, diving into planetary sustainability and the energy grid.
The transition from biological systems to macro-environmental systems is surprisingly seamless for an algorithm. Because the climate, much like the human body, is a chaotic, deeply interconnected system.
Right, lots of moving parts.
Tons of them. You have atmospheric pressures, shifting ocean currents, and dynamic human energy consumption, all interacting in real time. The digest really emphasizes AI's role in managing decentralized renewable energy grids. It's fundamentally shifting how we approach climate change mitigation.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's dig into the how of that. Because we know the old baseline problem with renewables, right? You can't control when the wind blows or when the sun shines.
It's classic intermittency problem, yes.
And the traditional fix was always spinning up a massive carbon-heavy gas plant to act as a baseload safety net, just in case the wind stopped. But the digest implies AI is solving this through dynamic grid load balancing.
Yes, and doing it instantaneously.
It's like the planet just got a brilliant automated thermostat. Instead of treating power like a one-way street from a power plant to a house, it is treating the grid like a high-frequency trading market, but for electrons.
That high-frequency trading analogy is incredibly apt. The underlying mechanism here relies heavily on reinforcement learning. The AI's ultimate reward function is perfect grid stability with zero carbon waste.
Zero waste. How does it even achieve that?
By pulling in hyperlocal micro-weather forecasting data, it isn't just looking at a regional forecast for the Southwest. It calculates the exact trajectory of a specific cloud cover moving toward a commercial solar array in Nevada.
Wait, a specific cloud?
Yes. And milliseconds before that shadow drops the array's energy output, the AI instantly reroutes stored thermal energy from a neighboring state to cover the exact anticipated deficit.
So nobody's lights even flicker.
Exactly.
And it isn't just reactive generation, right? The digest points out it is proactive demand-side management. If the AI sees a heat wave moving into a city tomorrow, it doesn't just plan to generate more power.
Right. It reduces the need for the power in the first place.
Yeah, it communicates directly with the HVAC systems of major commercial skyscrapers. It slightly supercools the buildings at 4 in the morning when wind power is abundant and super cheap. It's essentially using the concrete of the buildings as thermal batteries.
So they don't need to draw massive amounts of power during the peak heat of the afternoon.
Exactly.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this represents a fundamental systemic overhaul of global resource management. The digest expands on this by noting how AI-driven analytics are deeply integrating into industrial supply chains as well.
It goes beyond just the power grid.
Way beyond. A factory isn't just ordering raw materials based on historical quarterly averages anymore. The AI predicts product demand, calculates the carbon cost of shipping routes in real time, and synchronizes manufacturing schedules with the availability of peak renewable energy.
So efficiency at this macro scale isn't just some corporate PR initiative to look green. By utilizing predictive modeling to eliminate the inefficiencies in these massive systems, AI is essentially extracting virtual energy out of thin air, just by stopping the waste.
It absolutely is. We are optimizing the health of the entire planetary system using the exact same pattern recognition architecture that we use to target a localized cellular mutation in a patient.
Okay, I am with you on grids and tumors. Those are objective realities, right? They have a ground truth.
Yeah,
Math is either right or it is wrong.
sure.
But the digest takes a fascinating pivot here into something completely different. It details how this exact same analytical engine is being pointed at something deeply subjective, emotional, and traditionally guarded as exclusively human.
Ah, yes. We are talking about AI in the arts.
Yeah, it feels like a massive leap.
It forces us to walk into incredibly profound and, frankly, uncomfortable territory. The Digest outlines global exhibitions and concert halls, where AI-generated visual art and classical compositions are deeply captivating human audiences. It fundamentally blurs the lines between algorithmic execution and raw human creativity.
And to understand this, we need to talk about latent space. Because the AI isn't just copying and pasting clips of old music together like a digital collage. That's a huge misconception.
It is. It's doing something much more fundamental.
When an AI analyzes thousands of historical compositions by Bach or Beethoven, it is essentially converting the concept of music into a massive, multidimensional map. It plots audio frequencies, chord progressions, and tempos as mathematical vectors.
It learns the literal distance between a melody that sounds sorrowful and a melody that sounds triumphant.
It is mapping the architecture of human emotion. So what does this all mean? If a machine analyzes Bach and spits out a new symphony that genuinely gives you goosebumps, whose art is it? The coder, the machine, or Bach's ghost?
This raises an important question, doesn't it? When the AI generates a new piece, it navigates that mathematical space to find a completely original pathway that has never been played before. But it still adheres to the deep structural rules of what humans perceive as beautiful or moving. It is synthesizing patterns on a scale we cannot fathom.
But the digest uses the phrase co-created by humans and machines. And I have to push back hard on that framing.
Really? Why?
If I walk up to a generative audio model and type a text prompt that says, compose a sorrowful symphony for cello and piano in the style of the Romantic era, and the machine navigates that vast latent space, executes the complex vector math, and hands me a masterpiece, I didn't co-create anything. I ordered a sandwich. The machine made the sandwich.
Oh.
Why are we trying to validate human input where the machine is doing all the heavy lifting?
That's a great analogy, but I'd challenge your definition of where the heavy lifting actually happens in the artistic process.
Okay, challenge it.
The debate currently raging in galleries and universities, which the digest references, asks us to isolate the definition of creativity. Is art the manual execution of the medium, like the physical bowing of the cello string, or is art the curation of the idea?
The idea versus the execution.
Exactly. If a photographer uses a highly complex digital camera to capture a fleeting moment, we don't say the camera created the art. Even though the camera executed all the complex optical physics, the AI, in this view, is a machined muse. It is an infinitely complex lens. The prompt, the curation, and the emotional intent of the human directing the AI is the creative spark.
So the human provides the intent and the machine provides the technical execution. I suppose that makes sense if we view the AI simply as the ultimate synthesizer of our own history.
That's a good way to look at it.
Because it hasn't had its heart broken, right? It isn't feeling existential angst. It is holding up a mathematical mirror to our own historical creativity, rearranging it and handing it back to us in ways our organic brains wouldn't have naturally conceived.
Precisely. But consider the implication of what you just said.
What's that?
If an algorithm has become so adept at mapping the architecture of human emotion that it can consistently evoke genuine joy, sorrow, or awe from a human audience, that implies a level of psychological mastery that is incredibly potent.
And incredibly dangerous.
Very much so.
Because if a machine knows exactly which sequence of data will make me cry at a symphony, it also knows exactly which sequence of data will make me angry enough to click an article or fearful enough to change a behavior.
Yes.
Which brings us directly to the final and arguably most urgent pillar of the digest, ethics and governance.
The societal stakes here are absolute. Because we have seamlessly invited AI into our hospitals to make life or death decisions, embedded it into our critical power infrastructure, and allowed it to shape our cultural reality, society is suddenly faced with a massive, urgent responsibility.
We have to figure out the rules of engagement.
And it's no longer theoretical. The digest details how massive ethical questions around privacy, algorithmic bias, and systemic accountability are forcing rapid action.
It sounds like we are trying to write the traffic laws while the cars are already zooming down the highway at 200 miles per hour.
That's the classic cliche, but the frameworks they are discussing go way beyond traffic laws. Regulating AI isn't like regulating cars or airplanes.
Hmm.
It feels much more akin to governing the high seas or low Earth orbit.
Because no single entity owns it.
Exactly. The environment is inherently hostile to traditional borders, and pollution, in this case, biased data or privacy violations, affects everyone globally. The source notes that international coalitions are actively drafting these guidelines.
The international aspect seems non-negotiable.
It is because algorithms cross sovereign borders in milliseconds. A predictive model trained on healthcare data in Europe can be deployed on servers in Asia instantaneously. And if an AI system ingests historical human data that contains systemic biases and then uses that data to optimize loan approvals or medical triage, it doesn't just reflect those historical prejudices, it automates and amplifies them at an industrial scale.
But isn't there a massive risk of regulatory capture here? Just looking at the
Not
facts.
so.
The digest points to tech companies, ethicists, and governments working together to build these frameworks. But the nations and the massive tech conglomerates that are currently developing the most powerful AI, they have a vested interest in building a regulatory moat.
Ah, yes, pulling up the ladder behind them.
Exactly. They can write international guidelines that sound incredibly ethical on paper, but are actually designed to lock out open source developers or developing nations who just can't afford the massive compliance costs.
That is the exact tightrope these international coalitions are trying to walk, according to the source.
Yeah.
The friction is really between fostering open innovation and establishing baseline societal protection.
It's a tough balance.
It is. If you balkanize AI, where every country has wildly conflicting rules regarding data sovereignty and privacy, the technology shatters into regional silos. And then you lose the macro-scale benefits, like the global climate modeling we discussed.
But if you go the other way.
Right, if you allow a handful of massive entities to define the ethical guardrails, you risk monopolizing the most powerful technology in human history. The overarching goal is to anchor this technology so that it explicitly serves human rights and societal norms, rather than forcing society to adapt to the whims of the technology.
It is a phenomenal balancing act. And just stepping back and looking at the entire landscape we've covered today, the scope is honestly staggering.
There's a lot to take in.
We started by looking at the micro, how multimodal networks are predicting our individual biological futures, turning healthcare from a reactive scramble into a proactive partnership.
Yes.
Then we watched that same predictive power scale up to the macro to manage the chaotic variables of the global energy grid, squeezing efficiency out of the environment to build a sustainable baseline.
The ultimate thermostat.
Exactly. Then we ventured into the abstract, the latent space of human culture, wrestling with how machines are forcing us to redefine the very nature of art and creativity. And finally, we grounded it all in the foundational, complex geopolitical reality of international governance.
It requires a completely new mental model for how we exist in the world.
It really does. And for you, listening right now, the ultimate takeaway from this digest is that the pivot from operator to collaborator is already happening. You are no longer just the person swinging the hammer. You are the one deciding which house needs to be built, while the tool calculates the physics.
That's a great way to frame it.
You are going to interact with this intelligence the next time you visit a clinic, turn on your lights, or stream a generated playlist.
But as we close out this deep dive, there is one final thought I want to leave you with. Something that sits quietly beneath all these sources we looked at.
What's that?
We know that AI requires vast oceans of human data to function. It needs our medical histories to learn biology. It needs our energy grid behaviors to learn efficiency. It needs our greatest masterpieces to understand beauty. And unfortunately, it inevitably absorbs our biases along the way.
Right, the good and the bad.
So as we spend all this time analyzing the machine, we have to ask, is artificial intelligence actually teaching us anything about machines? Or is it simply holding up a massive, high-definition mirror, reflecting our brilliance, our flaws, and our complexities, and finally revealing to us what it truly means to be human?
A completely objective reflection of a deeply subjective species. That is something to think about the next time an algorithm predicts exactly what you need before you even ask for it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you a clear, actionable map of the landscape ahead. Keep questioning, keep collaborating, and we will catch you next time.